Character selection's always been a complicated thing. What seems like a simple matter on the surface is actually a long and drawn-out process that a lot of the fan base misunderstands. Severely. There are things that many fans believe are factors toward a character's inclusion that are completely different from the criteria Sakurai has said or implied in various interviews that his team looks for, and it leads to most speculators being completely off the mark on which characters have a greater chance than others. I want to try and clear up the facts over the course of this series, one step at a time. For this episode, I want to intro our feature character by talking about a very important trait: relevance. One thing that nearly every first-party newcomer to Smash 4 has in common is that they play a role in a recently released game. The timing varies depending on how often games in their series happen. Shout out to Shulk, whose game came out back in 2009. But if they weren't third-party or deliberate retro picks, that relevance was a key reason they were all considered and eventually got the nod. It's a clear and recurring theme that Sakurai has even touched on. He's described it as a window of opportunity, and yet it hardly ever gets brought up, even when talking about potential rosters for future Smash games. Even if it does kind of screw over some fan favorites, relevance is an important factor and one we need to treat as important when speculating. But what happens when a lack of relevance might be the only reason a character didn't get considered for Smash? Well, that brings us to a certain someone. King K. Rool, or K. Rool, they've used both pronunciations to varying degrees, is the leader of the Kremlings and primary antagonist of the Donkey Kong series. Since his debut in Donkey Kong Country in 1994, he's concocted evil plan after evil plan to, among other things, conquer the DK Isles, steal the Kong's banana horde, or straight up kidnap members of the Kong clan out of pure revenge and spite. K. Rool has a complicated personality. On one hand, he has a very over-the-top and cartoony appearance and mannerisms in his boss fights, where dealing damage to him often leads to some amusing injuries. But past that cartoony veneer lies a mind that is conniving, unstable, and, well, cruel. This is the guy who retaliates to having his attempt at conquest thwarted by ape-napping the guy behind it and torturing him for his own amusement while demanding his family and friends give up his most prized possession, not to mention their main food source, as ransom. To say no less about how he constantly changes personas to suit his mood. He's gone from king and conqueror to pirate to mad scientist to something reminiscent of a Star Wars villain and back again. But it's that depth, that combination of humorous mannerisms masking a truly twisted personality that makes K. Rool such a memorable villain and has made him one of the most requested characters for Smash since Brawl. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. The big guy hasn't done much for a while. Both Donkey Kong Country Returns and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze feature different bad guys entirely. In fact, K. Rool's most recent appearance was on the roster of 2008's Mario Super Sluggers. He's hurting for relevance, and when that's such a big deal when it comes to first-party newcomers, that was probably the reason he didn't make it into Smash 4. That said, I don't think he's completely out of luck. There are a few things that could happen to give K. Rool the chance he needs. You see, despite the common narrative, Sakurai and the Smash development team don't seem to dislike K. Rool at all. In fact, the Mii costume that many fans saw as a slap to the face was probably the exact opposite, an acknowledgement of a character who didn't quite meet their criteria at the time and a way to still throw the fans a bone. He's officially on the Smash team's radars and has a favorable enough reception to get that costume, which bodes well for the future. Especially since they did say the Smash ballot would be taken into account in the future. If the rumors of an NX version of Smash 4 come to pass and they pull another newcomer from the ballot, who knows? But there's another way that could solve K. Rool's relevance problem entirely. A new Donkey Kong game for the NX with the Kremlings in a major role. Hey, it could happen, right? Retro Studios has to be up to something. Looking at the big picture shows that King K. Rool could find his way into Smash eventually. So what would he be like? First off, his default appearance would have him wearing the classic cape and crown. It's his most recognizable outfit and most often associated with him, as well as the one he generally wears when not in one of his personas. Said personas could potentially serve as alternate costume sets, with options in his pirate captain and mad scientist outfits, the boxing gear he puts on for his final boss fight in Donkey Kong 64, and maybe even the Pharaoh-like clothes from Mario Super Sluggers. Hey, Namco did have a hand in that game and Smash 4. For playstyle, we want his kit to be set up in a way that encourages players to think like Rool when they're playing as him. Remember, under his cartoony surface, he's a very cunning individual with a wicked edge to him. We could bring that out with some trapping elements, moves with long-lasting effects designed to set up bigger hits. And I do mean big hits. Rool's incredible strength is another of his key abilities, and the damage output on most of his moves would be on par with the likes of Bowser and Ganondorf. But it's his traps that set the big guy apart from other bruiser-type characters, compared to, say, Bowser's strong grab game or Dedede's use of disjointed hitboxes with his hammer. Moving on to stats, another thing to remember, King K. Rool is big. His size fluctuates from game to game like Bowser's does, going from dwarfing the Kongs in some appearances to being almost the same size as DK in others. Smash takes some creative liberties sometimes when it comes to character sizes, so having K. Rool be right around Bowser's size still works and still makes him a commanding presence in battle, even if it means he's only slightly bigger than his archenemy. He'd also be as heavy as you'd expect a big fat guy to be, but I decided to make him just a little lighter than Bowser. I had to think for a while on this one. Decided that I wanted Bowser to stay the heaviest character in the game so his niche continues to work, and K. Rool can still feel true to character even if he's only second heaviest, and there'd still be a decent gap between him and DK. And if you're surprised by those speed stats, K. Rool is actually pretty damn athletic despite his bulk, and he can get around surprisingly fast in his boss fights. I wanted to put a cap on his mobility for balancing purposes, but having above average movement actually makes a lot of sense. Well, aside from giving him a slow walk, that can be a pompous, kingly strut. So let's go a step further now and get into his moveset. Despite being a big hulking crocodile, K. Rool has never actually tried to bite anyone in his boss fights, and he only ever seems to claw at people out of desperation, like his attacking move in Donkey Kong Barrel Blast. I could see his jab being a couple quick swipes because of that, but no more primal-ish moves of the type. However, he is the type to throw punches, something we saw loud and clear with his boxer persona during his DK64 fight, so there'd definitely be a few punches scattered in his moveset in places like his pummel. I could even see his down tilt having him pound his fist on the ground. K. Rool's also really big on ramming and tackling attacks, which show up constantly in most of his boss fights, and he doesn't shy away from literally throwing his weight around. His dash attack could have him stick his gut out and hit opponents with it. His down air could be a belly flop, taken from a move he uses in his Donkey Kong Land fight, with a long-lasting hitbox that functions kind of like Cloud's Dare, but with more horizontal range instead of a long vertical disjoint, and his forward throw could even have him bounce his opponent off his belly as a low% combo throw. Not sure how long of a percent range it'd combo for though. I could see his grab game being okay, but his main source of damage should be coming from using his traps and setups. And while K. Rool does get his hands dirty, the big guy's never shied away from wielding weapons to get the job done. From boxing gloves to his blunderbuss to even making like Peach and trying to bludgeon people with his crown, he's very willing to swing stuff around to deal damage rather than rely on brute force alone. I could see this being worked in a few ways. Could his forward or up airs have him swing his crown? A boxing glove punch for an up tilt, or an uppercut for an up smash? A forward tilt where he bludgeons opponents with the blunderbuss, and a forward smash where he pulls it out and fires an explosive shot at point blank? But here's where things get interesting. King K. Rool's special moves. Crown Boomerang would pull from his iconic attack from the first Donkey Kong Country, tossing his crown to hit enemies from a distance. We had 2 boomerang attacks already from Link and Toon Link, so K. Rool's crown needs to feel different from theirs while being a better setup tool and zoning tool to fit his playstyle. Maybe he could only throw it straight forward, unable to steer it on its way out, but in exchange it has less end lag than the Link's boomerangs, and its knockback is set in a way that hits opponents backward on its way out and in the same direction as it's moving in while returning, hitting them toward K. Rool to string into other attacks. His side special would have him pull out his blunderbuss and charge and fire a cannonball. It wouldn't hit very hard, not a kill option until very high percents, and it wouldn't travel very far uncharged while only going 3/4 the length of Final Destination at full charge. But hitting opponents with it isn't its main purpose. When the cannonball rolls to a stop on the ground, spikes extend from it to stab anyone who comes too close. The cannonball would stick around for a while afterward, and anyone who touches the spikes takes minimal damage and knockback but moderate hit stun, allowing K. Rool to follow up with a bigger hit if he's nearby. The cannonballs can be broken with enough damage, though it'd be kinda hard to damage them unless you use a disjoint or projectile, and you can only have 1 cannonball out at a time. Try to shoot another and nothing comes out of the blunderbuss. And Rool makes that one funny expression. For his recovery move, Rool straps into his copter pack from Donkey Kong Country 3 and flies upward to safety. It started off kinda slow, but gained speed quickly, reaching a decent distance overall. Unlike in DKC3, the propeller would be big enough to cover above him completely, dealing multiple hits to anyone caught in it mid-flight, though it wouldn't be much of a kill option. But while the propeller covers his ascent from above, he's still wide open to attacks from the sides. And if someone grazed his back where the pack is without touching Rool himself, the pack would malfunction and put him into freefall immediately. The three so far were really easy to decide on, but the down special took some time. I decided on a move called Crimean Slam, adapted from an attack used in his DK64 fight, which itself was based on the Kong Simian Slam move from the same game. Rool would jump slightly and butt stomp the ground, sending out a fast shockwave of green energy that travels slightly further than the range of DK's hand slap. It deals decent damage, but its potential lies more in what else it would do. It'd have a chance of making opponents trip at higher percents to set up tech chases that could lead to kills if the Rool player reads how the opponent would react, and if a cannonball is in range of the shockwave, it gets popped upward to hit enemies trying to pressure from the air. And if you use it in the air, Rool still does the animation, without falling straight down though, unlike the Bowser Bomb. But while there's no ground to pound, it spikes opponents instead. And for the King's final smash, Galleon Cannonade. After getting his hands on the smash ball, Rool would jump off stage and appear in the foreground on the bow of the gangplank galleon, standing next to one of the giant cannons from Donkey Kong Country 2. A targeting reticle would show up on screen, and with the press of A or B, he'd fire a cannonball as big as he is in a high arc that falls onto the stage from above the reticle's location, mimicking the cannonballs he summons in his original appearance. He could fire 5 cannonballs in rapid succession before having to reload, be able to move the reticle freely the whole time, and would get 3 volleys total before running out of ammo completely and returning to the fight. So, that's what King Rool could be like in Smash. The croc, the myth, the legend in a nutshell. Comical and crazy, yet conniving and cruel, built to use his cunning mind to coerce his foes into setups and killer combos while using his colossal bulk to outlast them and claim victory. He's a fan favorite who's been requested for a long time, and I hope I did the character justice. A moveset like this would bring his unique personality to the forefront while giving him a playstyle that's different from everyone else in his weight class. Even if he didn't end up a competitive threat, he'd still probably be fun enough to use that a lot of people would have a pocket Rool they'd pull out for fun. Our character next episode is going to be an interesting one. This one has moderate popularity, a steady stream of requests to join the fight even as far back as Brawl's day, and enough relevance right now to get the developer's attention. But some goings-on lately can make him kind of controversial. I'll leave you guys to guess who it is. See you guys next time, and if I were you, I'd keep an eye on your bananas.